Good morning. It's a beautiful morning. It's so beautiful. Thank you for coming. Thank you for joining us on the webinar. This is a wonderful day to talk about spiritual prosperity, which I will be doing. So this morning I'll be talking about spiritual prosperity. Then I'm going to be gone next weekend to attend some meetings in New York City. And then I'll be back the next weekend to talk about prosperity again. So this morning it's just mostly an introduction, to what the teachings have to say about prosperity. And then part two, which will be 2 weekends from now, we're going to get more in depth. And I have some wonderful examples that I'd like to share with you at that time as well. And next week, Louis will be talking to us on holiness. I've already seen his lecture. It's quite remarkable. You'll be surprised. So let me start with a quote from Mother Teresa. She says, "The trouble is that rich people, well-to-do people, very often don't really know who the poor are. And that is why we can forgive them. For knowledge can only lead to love, and love to service. And so, if they are not touched by them, it's because they don't know them." Isn't that profound? It's so beautiful. I was thinking of this morning when I was going over the notes for the talk, this dear friend of mine who is quite a wealthy woman moved to Texas and went into the hood. She wanted to see how people that live in the hood live and survive. And that was about 10 years ago. And now she continues to tell us stories about people she met and how so many of today's well-known actresses and singers also went down into the hood. If you've never studied the culture of the hood, go to the internet and learn that culture. It really is amazing. When I first heard about the hood, I was pretty daunted. It kind of reminded me when I would go to Chicago and go down into the what I call the caves of Chicago. It was very dank and dark, and it wasn't fun at all. And so I wasn't interested in the hood. And then the more she talked about the hood, the more I decided I better learn. There's something special about the hood. And there is something special about the hood. And many well-known singers today, and I'm not going to name names, came out of the hood. Very highly advanced and spiritual people came out of the hood. And why did this remind me of what Mother Teresa said? Well, we think that, like in the caste system, if you're born poor, there's something wrong with you. How can you be born poor and at the end of your life become a great spiritual being? Well, this is a theory. Many great spiritual beings are born in clothing that hides their beauty, that hides their light, that hides their wisdom, even from themselves, until they wake up. So when they're in the process of waking up is when they discover light and love and wisdom. But in that process, before they wake up, they are living with the poorest of poor. So living with the poorest of poor, and then they become wealthy and wise and great leaders. Now they're in contact. They're real people. They're not standing apart as a rich person, unable to relate, to poverty, or unable to relate to the poor. And to me, it's no different than you take a person who has become a great spiritual leader. They've become a great spiritual leader because of their experiences, and those experiences taught them there is a need, and they decided to serve the need of humanity without thought of self. And so without thought of self, what happens? It puts them into this sphere called the law of abundance. So they're not concerned, these great spiritual leaders, let's say the Pope, he is not concerned about money, he's concerned about poverty. Mother Teresa, the same thing. She didn't worry from day in and day out about not having enough because her consciousness was in this sphere of the law of abundance. And because she was a magnet, what did she attract to her? Money. And what was the money used for? To help those in need. Now, if she was born of wealth, believe me, we could hypothetically believe that her life would have been very different. Maybe not, but we deal with the facts. We deal with the givens, not what if. So think of Jesus. I don't think of Jesus a whole lot, frankly. I think more of Master Moria and Master Kuthumi, but Jesus is part of the hierarchy. Well, he wasn't born with the silver or gold spoon in his mouth. He was born in poverty. What was his need? It was not money. Why? Because his consciousness was in the sphere or the law of abundance. Spirit versus matter. We're taught in society that is grounded in matter to forget about spirit. It is all about matter. And when life is all about matter, life becomes fear. We become afraid of whatever we have, we're going to lose it. Well, I was at a seminar yesterday afternoon with some dear co-workers, and this one spiritual leader came up to me and she said, if you just had one Rourke painting, your group would have all the money that they needed. And I was thinking, well, that's because Rourke paintings sell for $1 million a painting. Not all of them, but a lot of them. And so I was thinking, well, how do you get a Rourke painting? And would you want to sell it? Probably not. But, we're a small group, and yet being in a small group, look what the law of abundance has provided us. We are so grateful when sometimes people will say, and they've said this to me over the years, how can you teach a course on the law of prosperity when you don't have prosperity? I said, how do you know I don't have prosperity? Because they didn't have prosperity. Okay, a person will sit and say, if you have prosperity, why am I giving money to you? Not to me specifically, but to the group. It's because their consciousness is in that sphere of the law of abundance. And the law of abundance inspires their generosity. It doesn't say that sphere of abundance doesn't say, you better hang on to everything you have, because if you give it away, there'll be nothing left for you. See, that's just the opposite of the law of abundance. So some people, our relationships or their relationship with the group is as such that their consciousness is in that law of abundance. And when there is a need, like in this group, they're inspired to give. And they're giving to a need that we are trying to fulfill. It's like our prisoners program. You know, our prisoners program is one of the most successful service projects that we have going. It's hugely expensive. I think we have gotten from a prisoner a stamp, you know, thank you, or a Christmas card. But they send us letters of how these courses have changed their minds, changed their life, changed their thinking. So it's like those in the group here, they're giving their time, they're giving their energy to take the teachings into the lives of prisoners who have no hope. They have no sense of future. And this is all free to them. Well, how do you take a small group to fund such a huge project? Only through the law of abundance. Only through the law of abundance. So if that need is a real need, there will be someone whose consciousness is how can I say it? It's like so in contact with the law of abundance, they are inspired where to place their generosity. They're not afraid. Those whose consciousness are in contact with the law of abundance have no fear of loss. So put yourself, you know, in a situation where you have been given an opportunity to give, but then you became afraid. Oh, if I give $100, you know, I may need that $100 to do this. I can't. But I would like to. If I win the lottery, then I'm going to contribute. Or the common phrase these days is, when the dinars come in. You know, at my life, at my time in life, I don't have the time to wait for the dinars to come in. We have to deal with what we have right in front of us. And what we have is this great gift, which we can truly consider is like a place in space where this law of abundance resides. All we need to do is to be aligned to it. And to be aligned to it means that our spiritual life is aligned to these great laws. And in this case, it's the law of abundance. If you feel you are lacking in whatever needs you have that are not being met, then you need to sit down for 3 or 4 minutes a day. Do that meditation that Val led us in this morning. That's the first step. When you're done with that meditation, then just align yourself. Just use your imagination to a sphere that is like, we could say it's a huge city in space that has everything that we need. But because it's spiritual, it means it's fiery. And if it's fiery, it means we have responsibility. This sense of responsibility that goes with what comes to us from that sphere. Now that's the introduction. Okay, now to my notes. Let me clarify 3 words: spirit, spirituality, and prosperity. Spirit is the divine aspect found within our human soul. That is spirit. It is the divine aspect found within our human soul. So if we're going to make a contact with this great city, which reflects the law of abundance, what we have to align ourselves with is the divine part of our own being, because this great sphere is divine. It is divinely given by hierarchy from the beginning of time. For example, last week I talked about Saint Sergius, and remember the story when we were talking about his followers, his disciples were going to leave him because they were so poor, they didn't have any money, they hadn't eaten for days, they didn't have any water, and they had lost their faith in Saint Sergius, who had never lost his faith. And he said, just stay here for a couple of days. They were going to go out into the city, out into the town, and beg for bread, and beg for food, and beg for water. And he said, don't go just yet. God will provide. That's the law of abundance. And 2 days later, in came these town people with their big cases of, on wagons of food, piled high. And of course, the disciples ran and started eating, and you know, all they could focus on is, we're saved. And St. Sergius went into the chapel to give what? His gratitude. That's that spirit within saying, we will handle this gift responsibly. That spirit. Helena Blavatsky defines spirit as that which belongs directly to the universal consciousness. Do you want me to say that again? That which belongs directly to universal consciousness is spirit. So if we all have spirit, this divine aspect within us, and that spirit is part of the universal consciousness, why not make contact with this law of abundance so that we can be more generous in what we have to give and meet the needs of the world? Spirituality. Spirituality is the result of our contact with spirit. So if we don't have any or part of our needs being met, it means to me that there's something lacking in us. It's like we're cut off. There's part of our consciousness that has removed itself from our ability to be in contact with our divinity. It means to me that we have become so earth-bound that if the planet hasn't met my needs, then I'm doomed. You know, I'm not going to be able to survive because nobody's coming to my door to help me out. That means we've lost contact. It's like St. Sergius's disciples lost contact with that divinity within, but their leader, St. Sergius, hadn't lost contact. That contact is a magnetic point that pulls and brings to us our true need. I was just thinking this morning on the way over here that, you know, for months we've been talking about building a front on the sanctuary. Actually, it started a year ago, last year. Okay, we finally got the building permit. It only took a year to get a building permit to put this little awning thingy up. It's going to cost us about $6,000. Where's the money going to come from? That's the next step. A check came in last week that'll cover the whole thing. We also got donations. So this tells me it's right. You know, we have a very strange front for this sanctuary. It's just a know-nothing front. Now this is going to make our building look more beautiful. So the law of abundance provided. It's so beautiful. So the teaching tells us we are made of both spirit and matter. If 20% of our consciousness is fused with our spirit, then we are 20% spiritual. But that leaves 80% left. It means that only 20% of all that we think, all that we do, all that we feel are in or is in alignment with spirit. Or in this case, with the law of abundance. Only 20%. It means that 20% of you, of me, is advancing, is progressing toward the realization of an ideal or of a vision. Only 20%. So this is why only 20% of our needs are met and 80% is left out here in the field. Like what we have now, a field of weeds. Because our lawnmower broke down. But the parts came and we'll get it back and there won't be any weeds when you see us next Sunday. But we have a lot of weeds, in our life that have to be repaired. So we don't have, the part that needs to be repaired is, why don't we have contact? It's like, what is dulling our contact that we can't recognize this law of abundance that belongs to us, but only belongs to the 20% that is in contact with spirit, or 100% that's in contact with spirit. Using this equation, it also means that 80% left needs to be spiritualized. So if we want to get rid of the weeds, that means we have to spiritualize what we've left go dormant. To be spiritualized means that we are moving into balance with the purpose of our life. The purpose of our life with spirit. It means that 80% of this self, that capital S self, is not yet in expression. That part of us that is spiritual can be used to transmute the other part. It can be used to transmute the other part to create the balance between spirit and matter. Prosperity. Prosperity occurs when our soul is in contact with the abundance of the future. When our soul is in contact with the abundance of future, with spirit and with self. Prosperity occurs when we are in contact with the highest potential within ourselves. Future can be defined this way, and this is from the teaching. This is kind of an abstract meaning. The vision, the future is a vision that the solar life has for us as a human soul. And that includes the law of abundance, which is part of prosperity. The solar life has a vision for us. What is the solar life? It can be the Christ consciousness. That when we came into incarnation, this is part of the plan and the purpose for our soul, but we have to find it. And what we are finding is this vision for our future. Meditation is a means to increase our prosperity. Simple. Doesn't cost anything. Well, maybe a $10 donation if you're in one of our meditation courses. But eventually, you no longer need a meditation course because your meditation muscles are so exercised now that you function totally in the spiritual triad. When your consciousness functions in the spiritual triad, you are a 24-hour-a-day meditator. So you don't need to meditate on a seed thought anymore because your thought is in the spiritual triad. But meditation is a means to increase our prosperity. It is through meditation and contemplation that we expand our consciousness into higher planes. Some of you, when you turn in a meditation course, it's like, I don't even have to read what you sent in to me because you say the same thing over and over and over again. You just move the paragraphs around a little bit. But you're not moving ahead. You're not expanding your potential or expanding your consciousness to move into a more refined state of life. A more refined state is like, as a musician, you learn about tonalities. You learn about the lower sounds and the higher sounds, the lower frequencies and the higher frequencies. For us, the higher frequencies is the higher worlds. Well, if we are so immersed in matter, all we're going to hear is coarse, dense sounds. Chaos, in other words. Through meditation, that elevates and refines our consciousness, our beingness in such a way that we become more spirit than matter. It is like a composer. You can take any of these great composers or any great artist. You can take a Beethoven, you can take a Mozart. Not Aaron Copland so much. Sorry, his name came because he's a U.S., composer. Take Nicholas Rourke. He took spirit by understanding color, even though he was limited because he couldn't find the color of spirit and put it into matter. There was no oil. There were no oils that could be mixed together to create a color that he perceived in the higher world. So he had to adapt to what the world could accept. Nonetheless, we're so drawn into his paintings. Why? Because it's spirit. As opposed to artists that hurt when we look at their painting because it's so dense and so buried in matter, even though their painting commands thousands of dollars. So meditation is a means to increase our prosperity, and it allows us to make a direct contact with the vision of the future. What's important to keep in mind, it's not just our future, because our future is part of everybody else's future. It was like attending this seminar yesterday afternoon, getting back in touch with co-workers of like-mindedness. They're all reading our publications. They're all listening to our YouTube videos. They're reading the book about the lives of the Rourkes and their relationship with the Master. They're reading our new Agni Yoga-Living Ethics Community Facebook pages, and they're talking to me about what they're reading. So what we have been given, we are sharing, and in sharing, they're giving back. So when we say that we're making a direct contact with the visions of the future, it's not our own. It's not just for us. So what is the difference between spiritual prosperity and material prosperity? This is so simple. Material prosperity is the lack. Material prosperity is the lack of spiritual prosperity. It is when the law of abundance is used for selfish means. This is why I said when we are in contact with this law of abundance, this great, huge city, for the lack of a better image, that hears our need, responds to the need, spiritually we are responsible to handle that gift if it's given to us in the purest and best way. If we use it for self-centeredness, selfish means, then we take on karma. Material prosperity is a creator of karma. Karma is the law of cause and effect. It is like a child that, mom and dad died, or mom died, or dad died, and they gave you a big legacy, financial legacy. Maybe their house, their car, their bank accounts, their life insurance policies, their investments. What do you do with it? I spend it. Look at what they gave me. And 2 years later, everything is gone. That's karma. Instead, if you build on what you were given, you don't deplete what you are given, you build on what you are given. Then you are in contact with that divinity within yourself. So abundance in the universe is unending. Abundance is unending. The universe, in its essence, is in each one of us. Can you believe that? And will you respect that? The universal consciousness, the Logos, created such a law for those who work, labor, and reap according to the seeds and quality of their labor. The universal consciousness created such a law for those who work, labor, and reap according to the seeds and the quality of their labor. We must also keep in mind that the law of abundance has cycles or seasons that seem to be controlled or recycled by personal, group, national, and global karma. I might have to carry some of this over 2 weeks from now. But that's okay. I think we're learning a lot about the law of abundance and how it can operate in our lives. Most of humanity falls into the mine and yours karma within the law of abundance. The mine and yours karma within the law of abundance due to the physical plane life. Think of families, the children who inherit the abundance of their parents or their family or whomever left them the money, and what happens, so oftentimes it breaks up families. They go to court, they sue. I'm not going to let Brother John get all of that money over there. Part of that belongs to me. That's the law of karma. That's materialism. That's the lack of gratitude. Some wills today, some investment companies today have a clause written in their contracts with their investors that when the investor dies and that money goes on to others, there's a clause in that contract that says if you sue, you will be taken out of legacy. I think that's so brilliant. Keeps families together, maybe. The more a person dissipates the mine and yours karma of thinking, the door of abundance will open to you. This means all that is mine is yours, and all that is yours is mine. See, I didn't understand it, and I'm so not going to get on with anything more in my notes. I didn't understand this. I remember many, many years ago when Torquem Serdarian was alive, and we were over in his house, and one of the members of this group asked Torquem, I don't know who to give my money to the White Mountain group or to the Aquarian Educational group. I don't know who. And he says, it doesn't matter, dear, because you're giving it to one. And I thought, looking at the checkbook, no. No, it either goes there or it goes here. But I had to grow up a little bit and have more experience to understand these cycles or seasons. And now I understand the law of abundance, having experienced it. And it is so beautiful, but we have to be responsible. So she did give her money to the other group. And it took me forever to try to figure out how that oneness came over here. Okay, but you look at it, that oneness published books. That oneness provided for conferences for us to attend. It gave us so much. It just didn't fall into our bank account. And that's materialism. I lost sight of what the whole law of prosperity is all about. So now I know. Spiritual prosperity says, in my soul, I know I do not lack anything. And I'm going to end with that on page 2 of my notes. This is such a magnificent subject to think about. Because the more we think about it and align ourselves to this great sphere of abundance and become part of that sphere, we lose our fear of loss and lack. Like those disciples of St. Sergius. St. Sergius said, okay, we have a need. My disciples are starving. Bring them some food. And the town people heard, they were aligned to this sphere of the law of abundance, and they came in pulling their wagons of food to feed the disciples. So I shall end on that. Now let me end on this. This is a statement you'll all recognize, but this is a good one to end on. Christ taught, first seek the kingdom of God, and everything else will be given to you.